I'm Robert Blecker. I'm a criminal law professor. I also teach constitutional history at New York Law School. I've spent a couple of thousand hours inside maximum security prisons and on death rows across the United States interviewing convicted killers. And from that experience, I've come to understand that some people simply deserve to die, and we have an obligation to execute them. So in a word, why do I support the death penalty? In a word, justice. In 3 words, they deserve it. I'm a retributivist. I believe in retribution. As a retributivist, for me and for my fellow retributivists, the past counts. It counts independently of the future, so the wrong question to ask us about punishment is, what good will it do? The right question to ask us is, what bad has been done? In the 100 or so murderers whom I've interviewed at length, in depth, to get their life stories and to get them to expound upon the crimes they committed and why they committed, what's emerged for me are 2 groups who I would say are clearly the worst of the worst of the worst. Remember again, Aristotle says evil lies at the extremes. At one extreme is the cold, callous, wanton killer who feels nothing. I'm thinking about one of the, actually 2 spray shooters whom I interviewed. Then there's the opposite extreme. I've interviewed and stood near people like Danny Rawling, sadistic serial killers who raped, tortured, and mutilated their victims. And as they describe it in the moments of their doing it, they were very emotionally involved. They weren't cold and callous. They felt thrill and exhilaration. These people deserve to die, and we have an obligation to kill them. Opponents of the death penalty, often called abolitionists by themselves as well as us, attack it principally these days on 2 grounds. Number 1 is that we might mistakenly execute the innocent. Number 2 is that it's racially biased. So let's take them one by one. Executing the innocent. We do not know for a fact that we have executed even one innocent person. We suspect we have. We probably have. Many fewer than the abolitionists claim, but we probably have. I don't know who it is, but it's horrifying that we have, if we have, and we probably have. So then the question becomes, first of all, is that a price worth paying? The ratio is enormous. The tolerance for error is extremely small, and it should be smaller still with the death penalty than with any other punishment. But it isn't 0. We do make a sacrifice of the remote possibility of innocence in order to accomplish justice in the vast majority of the cases. The apparent racial disparity in the death penalty, which is real insofar as 11 or 12% of the population seems to occupy 40 or 45% of death row, while real, is much more subtle than racism itself. Could be radically reduced by redefining what crimes constitute the worst of the worst of the worst. And a number of other changes could be made, which would radically reduce the apparent disparity without eliminating the death penalty itself.
My name is Steve Greenwald. I'm a lawyer in New York, and I am someone who has practiced in the death penalty area. For the last 20 years or so, I have represented people who are sentenced to death in what are called habeas proceedings, meaning on appeal after the death sentence has been applied or to the individual. As a result of my studies generally, and in particular my work in the death penalty area, I'm firmly opposed to the death penalty, and I think it should be abolished in the United States. There are numbers of reasons for abolition, in my opinion, and I'll just stress some of the most important ones from my point of view. One is that if we look at the overall punishment regime in the United States, both at the federal level and at the state level, and we compare it to punishment regimes in other parts of the world, we can see that the United States has among the harshest, if not the harshest, criminal justice system from a standpoint of sentencing and punishment of any other democratic country in the world. So we ask the question, why do we have such a severe criminal justice system? In my opinion, a part of the reason is that we have the death penalty, because the death penalty to me is the capstone to the criminal justice system, since it's, by its own terms, the most severe and final sort of punishment that's possible. And if you have the death penalty, as we do, in my view, it sets a precedent, if you want to call it that, or a tone for the rest of the criminal justice system. So I believe that if we can abolish the death penalty, as I think it should be abolished, that could lead to sentencing reform generally and bring us more in line with what other democratic countries are doing. All the studies that have been done, almost all the studies that have been done, show clearly that the death penalty is not a deterrent. And frankly, that's something I can speak to from experience, because I've represented numbers of people on death row over the years, and I've also met with and interviewed other people on death row, and I can tell you that deterrence would not be a factor in any of the crimes that these people committed. Third, the application of the death penalty in the United States is completely unequal and unfair in terms of along racial lines and along economic lines and other dimensions. Another attribute or defect, as I see it, in the capital punishment system is the likelihood of error being made. The wrong person. We've seen over the last 15 or 20 years since the Innocence Project was first established, something in the range of about 150 individuals who have been exonerated from death sentences because errors were made during the trial or in the investigation that led to the trial. I think we have to get rid of the death penalty once and for all.